Father, forgive us so that our trespasses could be forgiven, so that our trespasses could be forgiven. Despite the fact that he spent 27 years in jail, about 19 years in the first jail, what's the name now? The first jail, Robin, Ireland, and 9 years in Portsmouth. He came out not a bitter person necessarily. He came out trying to reconcile the seemingly thesis and antithesis by way of a beautiful rainbow coalition. Like we said the other day. He even involved, somebody like Buthelezi of the Ikanda Freedom Party. He reassured the white minority that though you've tortured me in prison, but I'm ready to forgive, and actually forgive them. So it is this coalition that is shocking, that is so profound to the world, that his footprints, I think, will remain indelible, so to say. So he formed the coalition, and he was able to successfully live above board. He didn't talk about perpetuating his reign. Nor did he talk of any primordial relationship. Maybe my son will have a second term in office, so to say, or what have you. After his fourth term, he was able to really install this patriotism. What is this patriotism about? Love for one's nation, loyalty to the state, and a zeal for its true interest, if you like. He made it a mantra, that marveled the world. Like I was trying to tell somebody the other day, he probably didn't have the oratorial ability of an Obama or the elocution of Martin Luther King. But I think he combined the two. Frail, delivered his point. He had the gift of a genius which defies analysis. I think to a very large extent, to a very long time, he will remain indelible. Not only, in the history of Africa, but in the history of the world. So I'm happy that I'm a black man. I'm happy that, after all, this paragon of virtue, so to say, is coming from Africa.
Well, gentlemen, while all these glowing comments of the life and times of late Nelson Mandela continue to pour in from different parts of the world, it begins to maybe beg the question as to what kind of leaders do we have, or what kind of leaders do our leaders think they have become, or what kind of legacy do they think they are leaving behind to Chukwuebuka?
Well, before I get into that, he made a point. He tried to compare Mandela with Christ and Muhammad. Those were moral and spiritual leaders. I don't think Mandela was more a moral or spiritual leader. Mandela was a political leader. But for any form of leadership to be effective, for any form of leadership to be outstanding, the leader must be ready to lay down his lives for what he believed in. It was Richard Nixon who said that a leader should be so concerned about his ability to change the course of history that nothing, not even his personal survival, becomes important to him. That any leader that is in power for what he can get will at the very best be a dangerous leader. So, and you see all the great men in history with that willingness to lay down their lives. Gandhi said, only if I die for India will I know that my life was worth living. Martin Luther King Jr. said, I have conquered the fear of death. He needed to conquer the fear of death to be able to do his work. Indira Gandhi said, I don't mind if I die in the service of the nation because I believe it will go, my blood will go to unify and strengthen India. So it's the same thing that Mandela demonstrated. For this ideal, I am ready to die for. And that was what distinguished him and made him what he became. In Nigeria, the comparison is with Nigerian leaders. Nigerian leaders are preoccupied with what they get. So as far as Richard Nixon was concerned, they can at the very best be dangerous leaders. That is, the best they can do is to be dangerous leaders. And that's what we have in Nigeria. Everybody's talking about money, wealth, and all the nonsense that goes with it. So we're not interested in commitment. A leader leads his people into trouble. He abandons them and runs away. Look at what is going on in Nigeria. It's all about politicking. what do you call it?
We'll get to that, but because of time, Barrister Wabshitu, we were talking about the ideals of leadership that you can draw from the life of Nelson Mandela and bring home. What would you say?
Yes, I've mentioned sacrifice. I think his life also typifies a life of what? Struggle. And if you want to bring that clearly to Nigeria, you see that there are elements like that whose life is akin to that of Mandela within it. For instance, Gani Fayemi, his life was that of a struggle for emancipation, struggle for freedom. And we need to also, in remembering Mandela, we need to celebrate people like that. They are also a life of devotion to people. And we can also mention political leaders who have distinguished themselves, even in Nigeria.
Like who?
Like Obafemi Awolowo, like Aminu Kano, like Azikiwe. I mean, the first generation of Nigerian leaders were out to serve. And then you can also see again, even in the present dispensation, we see, in spite of the rots that some of us may want to identify, we have also seen some leaders, even right now, trying to make the young man, Raji Fashola here, has demonstrated leadership quality. A life of sacrifice. People whose memory you cannot forget in a hurry, no matter how you try to do. And because Mandela now...
Barrister Wabshitu, I'd like to just point something out. You know, the people who live in this generation, they appear to be smarter, more discerning. If you watch your children, the way they respond to issues, you will probably begin to see that. Because if you look at the life of Nelson Mandela, it was free of flamboyance. It was very simple, as compared to some of the leaders that you have mentioned.
I was coming to that.
Who flourish in flamboyance and wasteful spending.
I was coming to that. What I was trying to emphasize is that clearly, on the global stage, on the global scene, there's hardly any leader that that you can compare now to Nelson Mandela in terms of sacrifice.
Okay.
But I'm also saying that in trying to appraise him or assess him for his virtues, we should also remember that there are also certain elements within our country who have also shown that kind of,
I agree with him, hook, line, and sinker.
Yes.
I do not necessarily, in the League of Petroleum, I would not personalize. We normally talk of ideas, so to say. Mandela, no doubt, an icon. Mandela, no doubt, lived for, Africa, lived for the world. And, like I said, it's going to be difficult to fill that vacuum. You discover that before Mandela came, we had this degeneracy in South Africa. So when he was...
I just want to pause you there so that we we want to go to the streets and get comments as to the life and times of Nelson Mandela. We'll come back to you. Please put your finger on that, the degenerative issues in South Africa. Stay with us. The program is Daytime Talk.
Nelson Mandela is a man of great words. The word is not enough for us to describe the enormous achievement he has achieved. He has achieved so much for Africa, not only Africa, for the world at large. So we are really proud of him.
Mandela has been a great man before he died, and even after his death, his good work will continue to speak for him. We are just hoping that our own politicians will be able to be like him one day. But presently, they are not like him. They are very far apart.
I think it's possible, but it's actually difficult because Mandela is a rare breed. You understand? He's a person that decided to devote his life for his people. So well, of course, why I say it's difficult, I say it's possible, but I say it's difficult because in Nigeria, people are more like interested in themselves than in others. You understand? But you still can find one or two persons, you understand, that can afford to live a selfless life like Mandela.
Mandela worked for the nation, he worked for the Africa. Use it to everything. It's not like, look at Nigeria now. If you have a person like Mandela in Nigeria, Nigeria will not be like this.
considering all of his virtues, who can fight against color segregation, give people voices. I mean, making people to see that God that created us, he wasn't making a mistake when he was creating black or white, and he united them. And the unity we can see in the people of South Africa today. Go there now, see what he has achieved because he brought people together. So I don't think there can never be another Mandela.
One of the things we see in the life of Nelson Mandela compared to other African leaders is a selfless leader. Is a leader that believes that his people can be liberated from every shackles of hardship, and we can see it in the way of life he lived. He lived a sacrificial life, even to the point of his death. So we really appreciate that in his life.
His legacy is basically his efforts, to liberate South Africa and Africa at large from discrimination, from racial discrimination.
I don't think there's nobody in Africa can be compared Mandela. Mandela is a very strong man. He's a God shoots his own. He's not an ordinary person. In the death after death of Mandela, the whole nation carry it. It's not only Africa alone.
Every one of them is very far apart. We are just believing that God helping them, they will change their attitude and their way of thinking. And their self-centeredness will disappear one day, and so maybe they will be able to be like him that day.
We cannot have someone like Mandela in Nigeria. It can't possible. Because if you can be able to have someone like Mandela in Nigeria, the person that we can want before is MK Abiola. That's where we can use to compare. But after that, there's nobody like Ghani. So after that, I don't think we can have somebody like Mandela in Nigeria.
That person might be upcoming, but for now, I think we've not gotten any selfless human being such as that.
Well, that was what we got from the street, very similar to some of the things we were saying. If you are a great political leader out there, the people around you are just telling you what you like to hear. Their true feelings are concealed because you are still around. But genuinely, you can't make the impact in humanity if the right things are done. Now, gentlemen, thank you for staying with us, but we've been joined by Biodun Shomi, who is also a public affairs analyst. So I'm just going to swap to you as you respond to some of the comments you heard. I'm sure you've been following the discussion so far.
Oh yes, it's actually about leadership and Nigerians' desire to have a selfless leadership rather than being ruled by their heads of government. What we have in Nigeria is rulership. Mandela has tried to exemplify that when he was in power. He proved the fact that you don't necessarily need to be in office before you can serve the people and before you are respected or influence events. But if you look at the march being, what I don't seem to agree is whether we can produce a Mandela or not. He did not take any magic. You just have to have the love of the people at hand. What we've seen so far in many African countries is we don't have the love of the people. The journey Mandela took, was started by Selassie in 1945 when Selassie came up with the idea that the philosophy that holds a race more superior than the other, until it is jettisoned, there will always be war. Later, Bob Marley sang a song about it, turned it into a song. So, and then we have Mandela walking it. So it was actually Selassie that saw the picture of Africa when it was being ruled by colonial masters, when we had racial problems. He came out with the theory, he philosophized. We had Bob Marley picking up on it and specifying it, locating it in South Africa, where Mandela was in prison, and Mandela walked that walk, to freedom. So, and what that shows is that Africa has so many good people, we can produce good leaders, provided the mentality of our leaders change.
The mentality of our leaders.
Yes.
Wahad Shitu.
Yes, I think Yesufu has really captured the issue very clearly. But we know that in remembering Mandela, we cannot remember him in isolation of what actually is happening in the rest of. If you look at the life of Professor Wole Soyinka, for instance, he said as late as 1969, that the man dies in him who keeps silent in the face of tyranny. That shows that if you look at the life of Wole Soyinka, he has always been against any form of oppression. At the time he dared the authorities, it was akin to what Mandela did in the fight against apartheid. So you can see people like that who are also committed to freedom. Committed to freedom. And in that category too is Gani Fawehinmi. But if you look at it globally, the person that represented that tendency, that ideal, is Nelson Mandela. So I don't think we should be too harsh on ourselves. The bulk of our leaders are selfish. That does not mean we do not have leaders who are selfless.
Yes.
And even in the present dispensation, I'm able to say, I was going to my own village. I am not a carrying member of any political party. And that is why I can talk. You understand? You understand me? And I passed through Osho, and I saw the Aregbe Shola wonder. Seeing is believing. You look at what is going on, the transformation that is going on in Osho. And I think the young man in Akwa Ibom is also doing something like, if you go to Kano, you see what Kwankwaso is doing. Transforming the lives of the people. That is what leadership ought to be. These people may not reflect the Mandela, I mean, but only some of these traits. So I think what the best thing we can do is to look at each of these virtues that Mandela represented. Mandela, for instance, is not an ordinary person. This is somebody who continues to enjoy respect, even outside power. Because he led a life of simplicity. To tell you that at the end of the day, what matters is not the riches that you acquire. What will live, what will endure forever, is the legacies